In 3, 2, we're live! It's time for another exciting episode
Andy's dad
of the Quarterback Center Exchange.
We really need to get an intro.
I agree. We need
Like a
intro
jingle.
music.
Yeah.
I want like flashing lights is what I'm looking forward to, like those spark lights.
Yeah, maybe a studio.
Yeah, and just a studio.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these days my investments will pay off and we'll get a studio or something.
$2
but in the
that
meantime,
you've invested? Yeah, that's really good. That's going to pay off soon.
well, I've invested more than $2.
Okay, all $3.
Anyway, welcome to another exciting episode of the Quarterback Center Exchange. I am your host, Andy. Thank you for joining the show. Don't got a whole lot planned for today, but the one thing that we will talk about for sure, as I'm sure everybody's heard about, the NCAA is corrupt. What?
Oh.
What?
Wow.
Players are being paid. Breaking news here to the Quarterback Center Exchange. And that's literally all I have written down in the notes today. It says the NCAA is shit. So we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we are.
I don't even know where to begin with anything. Hey, what's your initial thoughts to hearing of the FBI getting involved in the NCAA?
Well, the FBI's already been involved, haven't they, when they went over there and slapped the old Vampire Patino and got him fired from his job and everything that happened in Louisville and everything with Adidas. I mean, that's where the whole thing started a year ago, right?
Right. And obviously that was just the tip of the tip of the iceberg. And I don't even think we're into the fall show.
I was going to say tip. This is the tip. We haven't even gotten to the meat, the shaft, as some people might say in other worlds, of what's actually going on.
30 teams were highlighted in the NCAA like FBI probe. Of course, it's the same 30 teams that have been named before. Duke, North Carolina. Louisville's not on this list this year. They're starting to clean
because they already got busted. What do you mean? They already took out everything. They don't have a national championship from 2013 anymore.
Yeah, you guys have to forget that happened. You have to forget that national championship exists. The NCAA.
Yeah, that whole season just never happened.
I heard a great quote on Pardon My Take. I love Pardon My Take. I'm listening to those guys every day now. Great quote. They said, "Well, good news for Kevin Ware. He didn't actually break his leg on that championship run now." So.
Yeah, very good. He also never played a game for Louisville after that either, and I don't know who he is anymore. So
exactly. So he didn't break his leg. So good for the NCAA for taking care of Louisville there. They really showed them.
Yeah, they sure did.
They also had a really good guy on Pardon My Take, Dan Dakich, who was talking.
Oh God, here we go with the homie stuff again. Jeez Louise.
Well, what does
Dan Dakich got to say?
He brought up a really good point, how like all these coaches in the NCAA, they won't make a living anywhere else, no matter what else they try to do. So they'll obviously do what it takes to make $1 million now, $2 million next season, and then nothing the rest of their life because they get caught in the NCAA probe because the FBI is going to wiretap them. So, of course, they're going to pay a 5-star recruit $100,000 just to come to a school because that's chump change to Sean Miller of Arizona. By the way, Sean Miller of Arizona, obviously he's not coaching on the team right now.
Yeah.
News came up to us today that he's going to be in front of a board of regents tomorrow to determine his fate of Arizona.
Is that like the board at the school of Hogwarts in Harry Potter?
That's kind of what I was expecting, like Dumbledore to lead the charge.
Yeah.
Big old gray bearded guy. Not exactly sure what the Board of Regents is. I think it's the NCAA. So he's got to go all the way to Indiana and pay the NCAA to visit them because the NCAA just wants to make money. That's all the NCAA is after. I mean, would you agree? Would you not agree?
Yeah, it's a cash cow. The whole thing is. Well, I shouldn't say the whole thing is because the NCAA probably has just people working in other sports, other Division I sports, and Division II and Division III, but Division I football and Division I basketball are two separate things and should not be a part of the NCAA anymore.
Well, that's interesting you say that because a little show I listened to called Pardon My Take They actually had Frank Kaminsky on, and he said the same thing.
That's what Dan Dockich said.
Oh, yeah, Dan Dockich. That's what Dan Dockich said. Dan Dockich said all the coaches in the NCAA are scum. They can't make a living.
Didn't he coach in the NCAA?
Yeah, but he claimed
Didn't he coach in Indiana? Didn't he coach at Bowling Green?
One.
He didn't do anything?
He swore up and down he was the one clean one.
No, he didn't. Well, if he did, that's why he got fired so fast, because he sucks. He doesn't know how to pay people to come to his school.
Well, Kaminsky was on there, and he was saying they didn't get paid either. So entire Wisconsin basketball team, unpaid Wisconsin basketball team, beat a salaried Arizona team in the playoffs. So good for Wisconsin.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah, good for them. Yes. Where do we go? Where do we go from here? I mean, like we said, Sean Miller's hitting the Board of Regents tomorrow. He could be gone. Is there who's next or what's next?
What's next?
Yeah.
The NCAA needs to look themselves in the face, considering that they make millions and millions and millions of dollars off these kids who are supposed to come there and get an education. And they say that, well, they'll go to the pros and they'll make their money. But still, when you think about it, these kids in college football and college basketball, even if you're at Alabama, Alabama had one of the best teams in, over the past decade, and they're only sending, 10 guys to get drafted in the NFL draft. They're sending 13 guys to the combine this year. Last time I checked, there's 25 times 4, so there's 100 scholarships for every Division I football team. There's no way every kid's going to make it, so every kid's not going to see a piece of that money. But they're going to be on the field, and they're going to be making the NCAA money. They're going to be making the schools money. They're going to be making Disney and ESPN a shit ton of money. Absolutely. And they need to get a piece of it. That's where it needs to go. That's not where it's going to go. It's going to go to, condemn these coaches because they're so bad. I guarantee you there's people inside of the NBA, the NCAA, who know what's going on with these payments in the NFL, in the college football world and in the college basketball world.
Is there any chance, because there's small talks, and I mean obviously there's small talks. Do you think it's a possibility that these top schools, these schools that can't afford to pay these players, do you think they could break off, make their own league, make their own conference, break away from the NCAA? I'm just trying to think how that's a plausible situation, but that's a scenario that people keep coming up with, saying hey, make these schools break off the NCAA. Would that be possible at all?
Yeah, it would be possible. I mean, if you take somebody if you take the SEC. Some teams from the ACC, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, from the Big Ten, you take all the major players and you create, a 32-team or, a 40-team league and split it up into divisions and have conference championships and have a playoff and all that, you're still going to have tons of people that want to watch.
Absolutely.
It's not the NFL per se. I mean, you could still have it where they're still going to school, they're still getting that education or whatever they call it, because a lot of them don't even graduate and they're gone in 2 years or 3 years as it is. Yeah. The ones that go pro, I should say, and the ones that matter. So I don't see why they can't do that, and they should do that, because the NCAA is doing – the only thing it's doing is causing schools and players shame, hurting people's careers in the long term, especially these kids who come out of these places where they're not fortunate, their family doesn't have a lot of money, and they can't go to the NBA or they can't go to the NFL because there's these rules in place, but they need the money now because they want to support their family and do everything they can. And who's to say, that once they're good enough in high school, but there's plenty of 5-star recruits that come out of high school that go to these places like Notre Dame, Alabama, Miami, Ohio State, Michigan, that go in there and they don't do anything and they don't go to the NFL, and they're not smart enough to be in college. College isn't for everybody, just like football isn't for everybody. So you have to meet the middle there.
One of the best examples that I heard was an interview with Pat McAfee today, where he talked about one of the biggest examples of what you just brought up, the amount of money that Pat White brought to West Virginia. He got the athletic department of West Virginia a whole new stadium. He got Rich Rodriguez, one of the biggest contracts in NCAA history, because he's Rich Rod and coached Pat White. Then Pat White goes to the NFL and all of a sudden gets broken and doesn't have an NFL career. So after all of that, all he did for this school, all he did for these athletic programs, all he did for these coaches, making all these guys money, the NCAA money, selling his own merchandise, his own jersey, his own name. And he made squat in the NFL because he got injured very early on.
That brings up a very good point, because in college football, like Johnny Manziel or anybody that's a star, they can't go out and sell merchandise. They can't sign autographs and sell them. They can't do anything. They have their name. They've built their own brand, and even though they're not getting paid by the NCAA, they're not getting paid by the school, they don't get to see any of the TV money that comes in. They don't get any of that. ESPN doesn't pay them, which ESPN should be paying everybody at this point because of all the money they make off everything. I mean, they own Fox, they own, ESPN. They've got all the platforms for everything. Yeah. They don't have to pay the college kids. And the college kids can't make any money on the side.
One of the things, I mean, obviously the thing was those top 40 teams, however many we say 40 teams, breaking off, forming their own league. Another option that LeBron James brought up, is good point, is expanding the G League and just like inviting these high school players to play in the G League as opposed to going to the NCAA. Any opposition to that, or a football equivalent maybe even?
Yeah, but well, first of all, the NFL is never going to do anything because they've already got in Division I football, they've got their own minor league system that they don't have to pay for, and all the players are getting the top talent, and they're learning about everything they need to know in the NFL, except for how to manage money, obviously, because they don't have any. They're learning everything about the game, how to play it, how to be competitive, how to outsmart your opponent, how to train better than your opponent, how to eat better, how to sleep better, how to do all of that. Everything that you would typically learn in the NFL, you already know if you go to Alabama or if you go to Notre Dame or if you go to Ohio State. You already know all that. And the NFL doesn't have to pay squat for that, and they reap the most benefit out of anybody. That's where all their players come from, is from college. Nobody gets – I've never seen an NFL player get drafted out of, like, the Lithuanian football league like you do in the NBA with some players. Now, granted, it's not a lot still in the NBA, but you got players like Dirk Nowitzki that came over from Lithuania and made tons of money for the NBA and for the Mavericks. You got people like Pau Gasol, Marc Gasol, Manu Ginobili. Those guys didn't play American basketball. Tony Parker. You know what I mean? They didn't play basketball in college. They played semi-pro or whatever you call it in their respective countries growing up, and then went straight to the NBA.
I mean, go ahead.
So back to your question, the answer, in my opinion, is no. They still need those schools to do it. And the other thing is, if you take those players out, and you don't put them. And you put them in a development league or whatever, it's going to be like minor league baseball. Nobody's going to really pay attention to it. Nobody's going to watch it, even if they're the best players. I mean, if you think about it, the majority of college football fans that are hardcore, like Ohio State, up my butthole all the time, they're going to remain Ohio State football fans whether or not they're getting top recruits. And it won't matter, because if nobody has the top players, then they can still root for their team and say their team's the best. Because there's a large landscape of people that don't pay attention to pro sports, that bring in the revenue for these college teams and, get viewership for ESPN and bring in money and pay off the kids as it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's why college stadiums are 100,000 plus, and NFL
and getting 30,000 and getting
every other year. They've knocked it down to every other year, so that's good for them, at least. I don't know. And I also think that it's a BS move. I think it's total bitch move by the NCAA to have the FBI come in and do their dirty work for them. And then all of a sudden just be like, our hands are clean. We didn't know any of this was going on, which is total bullshit. And we both know that. We all know that. It's
right.
Total sham to have the FBI come in, who obviously people say they have a lot better things they could be doing right now. Government agency could be like stopping real crime, but instead they're worried about these coaches and these athletic boosters paying these kids. It's a total sham, and the NCAA itself is total scum at this point.
The NCAA is disgusting. There needs to be, just like there is with the college football playoff, there needs to be an independent ownership and league that invites these schools to partake in it. And I don't know how you get to all those schools. Obviously, there's going to be your 40 schools. And then you can leave out people like the MAC. And if people want to play Division I football and go there and get an education, they don't want to get paid because they're pursuing a career long-term, and it's not in the NFL. But there's still a chance that they could go to the NFL. They could still get drafted. They could go to places like Toledo and Bowling Green and Miami, Ohio, and play in the MAC or play in the Mountain West and do all that and not be a part of that big thing.
That's like these schools that we make their own paid football league. It could be like a co-op or something. I don't know how you define it, but it's no different than like these professional students going to like a co-op. There is some way where this dust can settle, but for now, Shame on the NCAA, shame on everyone in there because they're dirty as hell. We've all known it. Whatever happened to the days where like the worst thing you could do in the NCAA program was just have like someone else do your homework for you?
It's never been like that. People have been getting paid forever. It's always been this way, and people are naive and think that it hasn't been. And it's funny because that's how it's always been.
Are people naive, or are they just turning a blind eye intentionally?
They're naive because they really didn't know. People legitimately didn't know. I guarantee you can go back to the early 90s or the late 80s and some of the teams that were put together, especially at the University of Miami. But like when that thing happened with SMU, Southern Methodist, when they had I don't know who the running back was there. Yeah, and they got the death penalty because they were playing players. I mean, that was just the NCAA trying to cover everything up by getting to the one school that had been ousted and saying, oh, this is the outlier. This doesn't happen. I guarantee you that was happening at Notre Dame. It was happening at Oklahoma. It's happening at Texas. It's been happening everywhere since as long as I can imagine. It has to be. There's no way it hasn't been.
Didn't the Fab Five of Michigan, weren't they totally busted doing that?
Yeah.
But now John Boehlein's running a clean program. John Boehlein in Michigan's completely clean.
Yep.
Same with Jim Harbaugh. He's completely
he's clean too. Yeah, I mean,
that's how you get Jabril Peppers. You'd be totally clean and not pay a dime.
Well, I mean, you'll still get players to come to your school, but I don't know if you obviously saw that LeBron James interview, but he was talking about how he just was saying how the NCAA is dirty and it's not what people think it is. And he was telling the story about how when he was coming out of high school, and he said there were coaches coming to his house trying to beg him to go to their school instead of going to the NBA where he could get rich. And he said if he would have went to one of those schools for a year, he would have been rich anyways.
Yes, I did catch that interview.
Probably not as rich as he was once he got to the NBA.
Not. He would have gotten probably the same thing that this 5-star recruit got, probably just $100,000 offer, where in the NBA he'd probably making a minimum of $500,000 for his first year. I don't know the first overall pick's minimum salary, but I'm sure it was more than $100,000 to go to a school. So,
right. And so how about this? How about so if a kid goes to your school, this is what the NCAA needs to do right now. They need to allow kids to market themselves. And if a shoe company wants to come in and sign Johnny Manziel while he's a sophomore in college after he just won the Heisman Trophy and sign him to a shoe deal for 10 years, they should be more than free to do that. They shouldn't have any jurisdiction over personal business for the players. And even if they don't want to pay them, you need to allow them to use their own likeness just as well as you're using it to get money, to get their own money.
So to be clear, you'd be all right if they were to not get paid by the NCAA but have their own sponsorship deal?
No, I'm just saying that's an option.
Option. Yeah.
I'm just saying that's one way to try to combat it. But the moral of the story is you got to pay everybody. It's not amateur sports. When it's covered by ESPN every day, when the BCS championship has its own week and its own feel, the College Football National Championship, when it has its own week on ESPN and Fox, its own feel, it's running for, up to the game. They're doing coverage of it the entire day, and it feels like the Super Bowl. There's no way you can say that's an amateur sport.
So do you say that men's basketball and football break off, do their own thing, but unfortunately that's violation of Title IX, because that's how the NCAA, they kind of just, it's a whole sham. It's a whole messy
What's Title IX? Tell me what Title IX is since you're reading off the internet.
I'm not reading off the internet. I've known for a while that Title IX is basically everyone has to have an equal playing field, has to have equal coverage, equal opportunity. So same thing.
But we don't cover college swimming the way we cover college football.
No, Title IX isn't necessarily in general. Title IX is basically.
Is that an NCAA bylaw?
I do believe so. It's NCAA.
So it's not a government. It's not like it's in the Constitution.
I'll have to double check, but it's definitely. I mean, if you break away from the NCAA, you break away from that, which would be.
Right. So what's the problem? They shouldn't be a part of the NCAA. The NCAA can sit there and manage baseball, softball, swimming, wrestling, everything else that nobody watches on TV, and they can make no money, and then they'll realize that they've been acting like a bunch of jackoffs for their entire life. Because college football and college basketball is not an amateur sport, especially at the elite level, like when you get into Duke, North Carolina basketball, Ohio State, Alabama football. It's not. It's never going to be.
It's not. It really isn't. And the NCAA is a sham. And I'm going to keep saying that because they're a sham.
Okay, great.
And I think, on that note, I think we talked enough about the NCAA. Is there anything else you want to talk about, really?
Are the Las Vegas Knights #1 in the NHL yet?
I don't remember. I'll have to double check that. We'll have that answer for you next week.
Wow.
Are you excited for the combine this weekend?
No, I'm not.
Good. Questions have arisen by me, and now we're just kind of curious overall. First of all, yesterday was AJ's birthday, so happy birthday to him.
Thank you.
And now we're just kind of curious over what well, my computer kind of froze. It was pulling up. But we got exclusive video of you, what I'm assuming, doing some sort of Polish thing. Apparently you were just breaking cylinder. I'm assuming that's a Polish tradition.
It's not.
Do you have any comments on that?
It's not a Polish tradition at all, actually. Let me tell you. It was a very awesome gift that my lovely girlfriend Olivia got me for my birthday. And it was a rock that you had to break with a hammer, and inside of the rock was a gift card to an assortment of places that you could use it.
Was the hammer provided as well? Is the hammer a gift?
It was all a part of the package that came with it.
Nice package.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Olivia.
Congratulations on your birthday.
Thank you.
Year older. The JV report will be 26. Sending you gifts so soon, very soon.
How about a paycheck? How about the JV report sends me a paycheck? How about that?
You're breaking out. I can't hear you. Going back to the studio. We'll see you all next week. If you like the video, go ahead, subscribe.
Hit subscribe, click a comment, like a button, do things like that.